Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a return of the real and the rare. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Pleased to be joined by Mel Farr Jr. and his grandson Kenzo. Well, welcome back, Mel and Kenzo. Of course,
Thanks for having us back. Appreciate it.
And George Eichorn, my partner in broadcasting for 42 some odd years and counting.
Yes, sir. Good to be back. Thank you.
And Willie Epting, the Shake and Bake Media Group. My goodness, Willie, you and I are going to be doing, and just to let everybody know about the real and the rare before Willie starts talking about it, Willie and I are going to be doing this show a couple of times a month. So we're going to have a lot of interesting topics in and out of the sports world. So we encourage a lot of people to pay attention and look at this show because I got news for you. Willie and I have talked about bringing the show back, and I don't think there's a more qualified individual than Willie out there that can make sure that this show is better than ever. Willie, welcome back.
Hey, I appreciate you guys, man. Welcome, or thank you for welcoming me in. I'm truly looking forward to it, and I'm very, very grateful to be a part of this.
Well, the real and the rare is a show I did a while back with another young broadcaster, but he went on to go out there and do some pretty good things in TV on the digital side. And I've been waiting for the perfect opportunity to bring it back. And I thought, well, you know what? Here we are right smack in the middle of the summer. A lot of good things are taking place. And of course, when Willie was willing to come on board and join me in this venture, then I thought, well, there's no better time than now. And I'm glad we are doing it. So, folks, the title of this episode are Minority Hirings Improving in Sports. I'm going to focus on 5 particular individuals. So I encourage you to hang with us the entire time. I know that you'll understand that what we're trying to do is certainly hope that more of this continues, and we're going to address each and every one. So with that said, the first one I want to talk to, and by the way, I'm wearing a Miami Marlins hat, and I was at the Miami Marlins 3-2 win over the Pittsburgh Pirates over at Lone Depot Park, a game that took over 4 hours. And of course, for a lot of you Pittsburgh Pirate fans in my family of networks, too bad, so sad. I'm glad you lost, and I really don't frankly care about how good your Pirates are not, okay? So I don't expect Pirate fans to listen to it, although, you know, they certainly have contributed well with some of the great African-American players that they've had over the years, such as Roberto Clemente, Willie Stargell, and so forth. So with no further delay, the architect of the Marlins team, her name is General Manager Kim Ng. Now, she actually is of Asian descent, but she's worked with MLB as an operations vice president with Joe Torre, and she's worked with the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the White Sox. And she was one of the more groundbreaking individuals. And I saw that when we did Zoom phone calls, everybody was enthusiastic about her role at the club. And she seems to have settled into that role pretty well. So, Willie, I might as well start with you first, okay? What are your thoughts about what Kim Ng did in terms of groundbreaking? Because I know she was really a pioneer here, and now obviously more and more of these hirings are taking place, not only in the front office, we're seeing coaches as well. So go ahead, Willie. Kim Ng will lead it off.
Yeah, I think that it was a tremendous hire by the Marlins, and it's not a person or an individual that they just wanted to put in place for the sake of putting somebody in place. Obviously, you read off her credentials and spoke so eloquently about what she's done in the Major League Baseball ranks. Obviously qualified, well qualified there. I think that she, well, if I'm remembering correctly, this has happened within the last couple years. Yeah. And we've seen things in the last couple years that we've never seen before in terms of a pandemic and all these other things that are going on, and not just in the United States, but around the world. So it's fitting that something like this would come in an era where we haven't seen things before. I'm always on the opponent side, or proponent side rather, of somebody that is going to do something first, especially when it's, or particularly when it's something good like this. There's always been a saying that whenever you do it first, you get it worse. And I'm not sure if she's gotten it worse. I know she's probably gotten some backlash in the beginning, but the Marlins, I mean, from what I could tell from the outside looking in, they're in the wild card race, so to speak. So obviously something is hatching down there in South Florida, and it's kind of ironic that this happened after Derek Jeter resigned his ownership. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people, not just of a minority descent from outside of being a Caucasian, but for women in general. And we've seen the groundbreaking, and we've seen the the very first of a lot of things in this country when it comes to women being hired in roles, not just because they have a pretty face, not just because they have this or that, because they're really, really qualified for what they're doing.
Yeah, don't sell Kim Ng short. I've talked to her many, many times. Very smart individual, has a great background. And you know what? The Marlins are quietly in this race. And it doesn't hurt that they have a great manager in Don Mattingly, who I think is the most underrated manager in baseball, considering the fact that they don't spend a lot of money. They only had 13,000 today, which isn't bad. In fact, when I was there last Wednesday night against the LA Angels and Shohei Ohtani, they actually put 18,700 in a 30,000 seat stadium, 35,000. So it looked all right. But more power to Kim. I've talked to her. She's well qualified. All right, Mel, what's your take on Kim Ng?
I don't know much about her story, but it's typical. Unfortunately, the opportunity that she's getting obviously is a very, very tough opportunity. I don't think the Miami Marlins had much to lose, but it shows. I think it's a good hire in the sense that she's getting the opportunity. You're getting a different viewpoint than the typical viewpoint that you would normally get from hiring a male Caucasian. You're hiring somebody from a different ethnic group. A long time ago, my dad started the Black Ford Lincoln Mercury Minority Dealers Association, and then it became the Ford Lincoln Mercury Minority Dealer Association because they wanted to take it away from just talking about blacks, and they wanted to include all minorities, Hispanic, Latinos, and others. And all they want is an opportunity. All anybody wants is an opportunity. And I think this is all this young lady wanted was an opportunity. Now, she's definitely paid her dues, probably more so than anybody else. She's probably had to be 3 times as good as everybody else to continue to progress in Major League Baseball the way she has, because it is predominantly a male Caucasian environment that she's had to deal with. And so I think it'll be very good. I mean, obviously it's showing up already by the way they're performing to this point, where they're almost in a wild card position. So I think it's a good opportunity. I think it's good. I think other clubs will probably take notice, and maybe they'll start thinking outside the box, so that there's an old saying, you can't get different results doing the same thing, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, you're going to get the same results. So they had to try to do something different, and I think this is good. And obviously that community needs something like that. That's a very diverse community there. And so hopefully it continues.
Well, it sure is. And the thing is this. First of all, when you work with Joe Torre, that helps with credibility. When you work with the Dodgers and the Yankees, I mean, geez, 2 of the biggest organizations in baseball, and throwing the White Sox in there, and all of a sudden, and she, by the way, does have 3 World Championship rings to go along with it, George Eichorn. So again, Kim Ng knew that when we talked to her here in the South Florida media, that she accepted the responsibility of being, obviously, as you say, a pioneer, and enjoyed the challenge of being able to do it. And she took it upon herself. Hey, I'm ready for this. I don't care. And if I can go out there and have some success, that opens up other doors. Take it from there, George.
Yeah, and there's no question that she has earned her stripes. Like you said, all kidding aside, pinstripes, Dodgers, White Sox, MLB. I'm sure Bud Selig and Rob Manfred obviously recommended her highly for and assisted as much as they could during her career, the 2 most recent commissioners of baseball. And, I related back to the trouble in our society. The Asian Americans have undergone such a terrible discrimination against them. And I'm just very happy for her because, the players that come over from Japan and Taiwan and China and Korea, I mean, that is a big audience for Major League Baseball. That's a very big area of growth. And she being hired is a wonderful example, not only that, but of international recruiting and international attention for the sports, as well as trying to get some talent over here, which baseball's been pretty successful with. And then on a much smaller scale, like in the Detroit Tigers organization, they have 2, vice presidents. that are in the front office and have been for quite a few years under the Mike and Chris Ilitch regime. So I'm very proud of their two vice presidents that have been there for quite a long time. And one other thing I noticed, guys, and Scott, I'm sure you noticed this, that public relations departments for the teams have been working for many, many years now in being more broad as far as their staff goes. And, the interns and the young women that are coming up in sports management, they're getting more of a chance now. I noticed that, especially in the area of marketing and public relations for a lot of the baseball teams. So that's another good sign. Again, they got a long way to go before they get up there like Kim is, but it's very, very interesting, and I'm very proud of her as well.
Well, it's funny you say that about communications people. One of my favorite communications people with the Marlins, I believe he's a Latin descent named John Eric Alvarez. And, I'll tell you one thing. I have worked with a lot of PR people in my years. And when I've gone out there, started the Zoom calls and went through the pandemic business, and all of a sudden I was working through problems. Every time I would text John Eric and talk to him about, it's okay, I'll help you get through it no matter how many times you text me about it. He's the most easygoing, laid back guy. And John Eric Alvarez, you talk about the epitome of class, working for an organization. And his boss, Jason Latimer, is a nice guy, but John Eric Alvarez, being, I believe, of Latino, Spanish consent, this guy is one of the best guys I've ever worked with. And every time I run into problems with a texting, don't worry, I'll take care of it. Boom, he does. This guy's spot on. So, all right, well, so let's go ahead on to the San Jose Sharks. We talk about the National Hockey League showing a bit more on the minority side. And this guy's brother actually is the general manager of the Miami Dolphins. I believe it's Greer, right? Mike Greer is who we're talking about for the San Jose Sharks. He's the first Black GM in NHL history. But when you talk about some of the history of some of the best National Hockey League players, you got Jerome McGinley, you've got Grant Fuhr, Steve Weeks, PJ Subban, just to name a few. So I was glad to see the San Jose Sharks go ahead. I'm trying to remember who the brother's name is. Do you know, Willie, off the top of your head, Greer's brother? What's that? All right. We're all right, Willie.
Chris
Greer. Okay.
Chris Greer, yeah.
So, all right. So, anyways, let's talk about Chris Greer.
My bad. I was muted there, Scott. I'm not used to having to mute myself.
Well, that's okay. Well, I actually used to make some of those mistakes one time when I was on a Zoom call or accidentally muted myself. But thankfully, they have those little love notes say, you're muted, but we'll unmute you for you. So you talk about a TV, a little bit of learning. That's okay. But all right, then I'll lead off with you, Willie. Okay, let's talk about Chris Greer. Mike Greer runs in the family in terms of general managers. So I am so happy that Mike got the opportunity in San Jose. Go ahead.
Yeah. Chris Greer has actually done a phenomenal job out there in Miami as far as putting that team together. But with Mike, he's a 47-year-old person and a black man, and look, he's been in this game for a while. He spent 14 seasons in the league as a top defensive forward, and has been a leader. It seems to me that those defensive guys that play hockey are always, or seemingly always, in some sort of leadership role on their squads. So the San Jose Sharks, I mean, I'm not very big on hockey. I would very much like to get into it. It looks very, very complicated to me, but that's just me. But in terms of Mr. Greer, hey, anytime again you can have a first in something, then you're setting the precedent and you're changing the narrative, and you're actually going to make the landscape look a little different. So congratulations to him. It seems that family, the Greer family, they should be awfully proud of what these guys are doing, or what they've doing, or what they've done, and what they're gonna do. I think it's terrific. I don't think I can tell you there's not enough of people that look like me that are in that sport, but they probably have an interest in getting into that sport like I do, as far as watching it and then learning the rules and all those other great things. But yeah, I mean, the guy is thoroughly qualified. Again, they're not just sticking a face in there. They're not just putting a warm body in there just for the sake of public relations or for marketing. So the Sharks, Yeah, they're changing the tank.
Yeah, well, once upon a time, they used to play in the Cow Palace out in San Francisco. I know a little bit about the Sharks, but the reality of the situation is you're right. There are starting to be more and more African American players, though, and the four that I mentioned were obviously the cream of the crop. But I'm starting to see more and more African Americans play hockey, which is our far fact that Mike Greer has an opportunity to be, like you say, Willie, a first, okay. And then the other four people I mentioned, in case you're joining us, Jerome McGinley, Grant Fuhr, Steve Weeks, PJ Subban, just to name a few of them, have done pretty well. So, George Eichorn, you're in hockey town. So, I know you talked about Giovanni Smith, who I've actually liked watching him play because he doesn't mind mixing it up a little bit, show a little toughness. But let's talk about the hiring of Mike Greer for San Jose.
Again, I echo what Willie said, and you too, Scott, that here's a pioneer. Here's another great opportunity for a sport which, is very lacking in minorities. I mean, both in female and in, black representation. I'm very happy for Mike. He deserves it. He's worked, again, another person that's worked their way up, been around the game a long time, a hockey rat, if you will, and loves the sport, as so many in the African American community do love the sport. It's going to take a while. Let's just be honest here. There are not, it's a long road. I mean, I think about the head coaches and the assistant coaches and the trainers and some of the other positions in hockey. And again, they're all dominated by pretty much white males. But this is good news. It's good news for the sport. And again, on another level, I mean, Detroit, which is predominantly a black downtown area, the Red Wings are getting more and more fans to come out from the black community, which is great. I mean, that when I'm at the games covering at Little Caesars Arena, and before that, Joe Louis Arena, it wasn't very common to see many black men and women there as fans, but I've noticed at Little Caesars Arena, and one of these things is, of course, we're getting more housing. More people are living downtown Detroit in the new apartments and condos that are being built, which really helps Detroit's downtown image and population. So that being said, I think it's great. I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, I think that Greer has done a good job, and God love him. I hope he does a wonderful job with San Jose, and let's hope for more minorities, especially in hockey.
Well, it's not easy working your ranks way up the ranks when you're in the National Hockey League, maybe other sports, because hockey is a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of African American involvement, but at least it's starting to make progress, and that's the key. Mel, what are your thoughts about Mike Greer?
I think it's a good hire. It's a shame that here we are in 2022 and we're just talking about, the first. We're still talking about first. We're still having first. Thought we'd be beyond this by this point. But, the more diverse you can get as far as your management is concerned, the different ideas that flow. You're not having the same ideas coming through. And I think you're going to be a lot more successful. So I think, again, they will see success on the ice because of this hire. And hopefully, like I said, other clubs will pay attention. There's a lot of talented people in this country. There's a lot of talented people in this world, and all they need is an opportunity. And once they get the opportunity, look out. The sky is the limit. So, the more diverse. Obviously, we live in a very diverse society, and management in our Fortune 500 companies and so forth and so on should start to look more like the society in which we live in, as opposed to, what it's been looking like for the last 100 years or so. Give everybody an opportunity. Let everybody have that access. And I think all it's going to do is make us that much better and that much greater.
All right. Well, just to let everybody know, okay, this is The Real and the Rare, the return of The Real and Rare. And to subscribe to the South Florida Tribune, please go to our YouTube channel and please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel if you haven't already. You'll get some great shows, not only visually as well, or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter @Tribune South. To advertise, call 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. So again, folks, please go out there. If you haven't already, subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. We have a lot of great shows, and Bringing the Real in the Rear is great. We have No Limits, as well as a lot of our other sports shows, like the Sports Exchange, 108 baseball talk, Inside the Pigskin, of course, the Fire Up series, Fire Up Michigan, Fire Up Florida, and the list goes on and on. The South Florida Tribune podcast. Lots of different podcasts for different interests, and we can go from there. So with that said, okay, we'll go out there and stay on that first theme, okay? But this time we're going from San Jose to Las Vegas. The NFL's first black female president, Sandra Douglas Morgan, was hired by Mark Davis. Again, another first, Willie, so lead off with this one as well. But the Raiders, before you go any further, have never been afraid to go out there and work with minorities. Let's face the reality. Art Shell was a coach over there for a while. And Al Davis, has a pretty good track record with minorities. So I guess it's probably only fitting that I think that Sandra Douglas Morgan would be hired by the Raiders organization. And before you go any further, I had a feeling, but I'm not sure if it'll ever happen, that Colin Kaepernick could have been signed there. You never know. They're willing to do a lot of different things. I'm not going to open up those cans of worms. But again, this is more of a credit to the Raiders as an organization. And Morgan, obviously, is the latest in the first category. Willie, go ahead and take it from there.
Yeah, again, very, very qualified. Not just a person that they stuck in there. And you mentioned it, Scott. The Raiders have been known to do this. These groundbreaking hires, these precedents that have been set throughout the franchise's history, going all the way back to Oakland, then to Los Angeles, and then back to Oakland. Reggie McKenzie was the GM there right before John Gruden got there. I actually am trying to get him on one of my shows. Stay tuned for that. But in terms of Sandra, she is more than qualified for this spot. I mean, she's from Vegas, went to high school there. Is a local person. Obviously, she went to the University of Nevada at Reno. You spoke of Colin Kaepernick. Of course, that's the same school that he went to. And then on top of all of that, when you think about the things that have gone on in the franchise of the Raiders the last couple of years with John Gruden and all of the things that he said, it's only fitting that Mark Davis would do this. And the Raiders, and that's my favorite team, by the way. So you might see a little bit of a glow on my face as I talk about this. But the Raiders have always been that franchise that always seemed to push the envelope, whether it was on the field, whether it was in management, whether it was on the field management as far as coaches go, and obviously breaking the mold with this. I think it is a tremendous hire. I think it is going to really, really set some things on edge, not just in the Raiders organization, but in the NFL as a whole. And then the precedent, again, that's being set, especially for little black girls that can look up to her and say, hey, you know what? I love sports. I love football. I have a chance to do something with this. And if I can work hard and be afforded certain opportunities, then yeah, I can work my way up to where she is. And I want to say something real quick before I hand it back to you, Scott.
Sure.
Mel said something earlier that really struck a chord with me, and he said there are a lot of talented people in this country. There's a lot of talented people in this world. There are a lot of talented African-American men and women everywhere. And in terms of us trying to get an opportunity or certain rights, I heard Shannon Sharp say this. He said that we don't want to take the rights of everybody else that has the rights. We just want a little bit of piece of the rights that you guys have. That's all we want. That's all we're asking for is a true opportunity, and one that is not based on nepotism or a what you call a friendly hire or whatever the case may be. And these hires that we've talked about, not just with Greer and Kim and now with Sandra, they're all qualified, more than qualified individuals. So hats off to, number one, the franchises for having the guts and the intestinal fortitude
Kenzo.
to make these decisions to do this. And I look forward to the day, just like Mel said, I look forward to the day when we stop saying the first of this, the first of that.
Well, it's amazing. I'm looking at your background right now. I was at the Oakland Coliseum and saw the Lions play the Raiders, and boy, you talk about a very spooky, crazy place. It's one thing. So
Yeah.
I was intimidated when I went there. I've been to the Oracle Arena too, and so bad, but when you go to a Raiders game, there's a mystique about it where it just sends chills down your spine. All right, Mel, along with Kenzo. Okay, let me go over the crew again. My name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth. Please be joined by George Eichorn, Willie Epting Jr., and Mel Farr Jr. A couple of juniors there. My goodness. All right. I know I'm seeing double with some juniors. And I guess George and I feel like we are seniors. So, all right, Kenzo, I'm not sure what we call you. You're a junior, 4 or 5 generation. Forget about it. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Mel Farr Jr. What's your take on what Willie had to say?
Well, the Raiders have always, they've never been afraid to look outside the box. I mean, they had, I want to say the first female CEO when they had Amy Trask there. Obviously, they had Art Shell there. They had Reggie McKenzie there. When, Al Davis has never been shy about giving opportunities to to minorities or to who he feels is the best qualified candidate. And it doesn't surprise me. I think Mark Davis is trying to replicate what his father did. They brought a TV guy in there before, 2 TV guys really, with John Gruden and Mayock, and that was a disaster. Right. Yeah. So he's thinking outside the box. Then this lady's more than qualified. Her husband played professional football. She's been around the game for a long time. She's a native there in Las Vegas. Went to undergrad school and grad school there in Las Vegas. Worked, served as a public servant, I believe, in the DA's office or something of that nature. So she knows that community inside and out. And I think that's she should be an outstanding hire for the Las Vegas Raiders. They obviously have had some issues as well, which a lot of the teams have had. With the Washington Redskins, with their problems that they've had in this. There's been this good old boys club. Things that have been just regularly accepted. They're not accepted anymore. Even with Dallas Cowboys and Jerry Jones, and him having this child, this love child, and so that's just the good old boy network. That's the things that they used to do, and they used to just kind of keep it to themselves. Well, now with the Me Too movement, you want to call it, or whatever it is, that stuff is just not acceptable anymore. You just can't continue to do those kind of things. You have to run an organization that's first class from top to bottom. You just can't talk about it. You got to be about it. And so now Mark Davis has made this hire, and I think it'll be great for the organization. I think it's going to be great for them publicly, obviously, to have her there. And I think it's going to be great for the people inside that work there to have a female there that change the atmosphere within the organization.
Yeah, I guess it's just too bad a lot of the millennials that might be watching this broadcast never had a chance to see Al Davis take the Pete Rozelle trophy and hand it to him, because I'm going to tell you, or the Vince Lombardi trophy handed by Pete Rozelle, because I'll tell you, you want to talk about 2 guys that hated each other. I don't know who hated each other more, Bowie Kuhn against Charlie Finley or Pete Rozelle and Al Davis. We'll leave that for another show. All right, so with that said, I don't know. I think about the Lombardi trophy with Pete Rozelle having to hand it over to Al Davis, and then Al Davis suing him because of the move back and forth to L.A. Oh, well, whatever. All right, George Eichorn, I said a mouthful, so I'll let you say a whole lot of a mouthful about
Mel stole some of my thunder, but let's face it, the NFL has an image problem right now with females. And it's not just the ownership. Okay. I know you mentioned about Jones and Snyder, but it's the players too. There's been so many domestic violence issues in the NFL and the NBA, but I'm just saying that the promotion of a female into that type of position is outstanding. It cannot be underestimated. And she was head of the Nevada Gaming Commission. Now she's the head of the Nevada Gaming Commission. Is an unbelievable job, and we all know Las Vegas is the king of gambling. Right. So, I mean, to be able to handle that job as she did in the state of Nevada is wonderful. And I want to send a nice message here from my Detroit teams. Okay, You guys need to remember that Sheila Hemp is the owner now of the Detroit Lions. She's part, with her mother and her sisters and her brother. But all I'm saying is that she has been put into a position that, again, is high visibility. Sheila has done a good job, surrounded herself with good people, and we're very proud of her here in Detroit. I'm not trying to be patronizing to them, but they needed a fresh face. Her mother was up there in age. Let's just leave it at that. Martha tried her best for a few years, but then she had to make some very tough decisions with firing some personnel in the Lions front office. But now that Sheila is a younger person, she's been very active, I understand, in the NFL meetings, and that's good. That's good for Detroit. It's good for the sport. And then also going back to hockey for a second, we had 3 women here, as Scott knows, that really the Detroit Red Wings should be darn proud of, and I know they are. Margaret Norris Riker, Colleen Howe, and Marion Illich. All 3 of those women had a big part in hockey in Detroit over the years, and in ownership or in management. And of course, Colleen, if you didn't know this, managed Gordie Howe. I mean, she managed him, his personal appearances, his interviews, all of that fun stuff, and his books and endorsements. But I just wanted to mention that, guys, because in Detroit, hockey-wise, we are proud of that. And again, getting back to this hire, I think it's wonderful, and it's wonderful to have female ownership in the NFL as well.
All right, well, if you're going to, why don't we just stay with you, George, and we'll just segue to another hire that occurred with the Detroit Lions, okay? And I'm talking about Brad Holmes as the executive vice president and general manager. I actually think he fleeced the Rams when Matt Stafford. Yes, the Rams got the Super Bowl championship. And you get Jared Goff, who's a very capable quarterback, and then all those draft choices. And when you see general managers fleece them, it's one thing, but when you have a minority general manager given a full control over it, making a great move and a great first impression off the bat. And I'm talking a first impression off the bat. And I really, truly think that Brad Holmes is a home run hire. I really do. So I think the Lions, folks, I know it's been a long time since you won a championship, like 1957 on my birthday, by the way, December 29th, 1957, on my birthday against the Cleveland Browns. Okay. Brad Holmes, to me, is a home run hire. I'm glad that the Fords gave him the responsibility, and glad that Chris Spielman was a part of that hire. And I think the guy's going to do a heck of a job if he hasn't already. The Lions just need to be patient. I know Dan Campbell, I think, is a good hire too. And I've heard a lot of compliments around him, but we'll keep the focus on Brad Holmes. All right, George, why don't you give me your impressions about the Brad Holmes hiring with the Detroit Lions?
Yes. He came from the Los Angeles Rams. As most of our viewers probably remember, he was in the front office for the Rams, but obviously not the high office of general manager. He wasn't in, but he observed and was right there when they made their trades and made their draft choices and their player talent acquisitions and things like that. The jury is still out. Obviously, the Lions only won 3 games last year, but he, on the surface, he looks like a very bright young man. Like you said, Scott, he's got a great future. The Lions, of course, had a black general manager in Martin Mayhew, but Martin, was let go by Mrs. Ford. One of the mentions that I made earlier of the firing, and Tom Lewan, the president, was let go, and they've had many coaches. We don't want to get into that. But I'm with you on that one, Scott. Brad looks like he's got the tools, the knowledge. He knows the NFL. He's very good on player development. And the hiring of Dan Campbell hopefully is a good move. He's very enthusiastic, as everybody knows, Campbell is. And, of course, the Lions took Hutchinson first in the draft. They've got a long way to go. But, on paper, on the surface, I'm impressed with him. I am. I think Brad's got a bright future, and certainly the Lions hope for the same, and all their fans do too, of course.
Well, Martin, before I turn it over to Mel, okay, Martin Mayhew straightened out the mess that Matt Millen made. So
That
that was
true.
a bad situation. So And of course, Martin Mayhew landed with the Washington football team, who, by the way, is another minority in the organization with Ron Rivera trying to clean up the Dan Snyder mess and the nickname. Won't get to that, but I certainly want to make mention of it. So as I turn it over to Mel Farr Jr., okay, let's talk about the addition of Brad Holmes. What are your thoughts about that hire, Mel?
I thought it was a good hire. You know, the one thing about the Lions, something that they're going to have to learn is that you've got to re-sign your draft picks. You can't allow your draft picks to leave via free agency or trade them away, and you're constantly rebuilding over and over again. It costs money to build a championship team, and you know you're going to have to build it around something. I mean, I know they've had some centerpieces there, obviously with Matt Stafford, and they had Calvin Johnson there for a little while. But you know, one of the big problems that they've had is that they, for whatever reason, they never like to re-sign their draft picks. They always let them get away. Right. So, you know, I'm excited about the opportunity he has. Obviously, you talked about Martin Mayhew being there. I think he did an excellent job, obviously cleaning up after Matt Millen. I think they kind of let him go prematurely, but I think he and the president, Tom Lawan, they were kind of, you know, they're kind of attached at the hip. So you had to get rid of one. If you got rid of one, you had to get rid of them both. But excited, you know, really I am, you know, for the first time in a long time, excited to see what the Lions are going to do here in the upcoming near future.
All right, Willie, chime in on Brad Holmes, please.
Yeah, he's already been tabbed as one of the top 10 executives in the NFL by some analysts. And when you look at the landscape, or when you look at the makeup of the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff, yeah, he gets a bum rap, but I think people forget that he was the quarterback of a Super Bowl team that actually did not fare well because of the X's and O's that Bill Belichick outdid Sean McVay in. But when you look at what they have on their squad, DeAndre Swift is a pretty good running back. They've got one of the better tight ends in TJ Hawkinson. They signed DJ Chark Jr. from the Jaguars in the offseason. They drafted Jamison Williams, but I know he's going to be out for the foreseeable future, but the future looks bright. And then when you have a Penei Sewell that's actually protecting your quarterback, and then you get Aiden Hutchinson as the number 2 overall pick in the draft, a homegrown kid, they are quietly putting some things in place up there in Detroit. And you can say what you want about their record from last year. Those dudes were in every single game. And that is a tribute to their head coach, who is fiery, who is competitive. He wasn't the best tight end, the most talented tight end when he played for the Cowboys and for the Dolphins, but those dudes will run through a wall for him. And with Holmes coming in and everything that he brings to the table, helping to put together a championship roster in Los Angeles with the Rams, I don't expect anything different with Detroit. So Detroit Lions fans out there, I got people in Detroit, 7 Mile, West Side Detroit. What's up? You guys can start to get a little bit excited, because when you think about what they're doing in Detroit with these youngsters, and obviously with Aaron Rodgers on the back end of his career, and Minnesota, you never really know what you're going to get. And Chicago obviously is rebuilding as well. Brad Holmes is putting himself in position to have the Detroit Lions talking playoffs sooner rather than later.
Well, let's face the reality. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that their wide receivers last year weren't that good. It was an area of need, and I'm putting it lightly, okay? It doesn't help that they lost a 60-some-odd yard field goal to the Ravens, a game they should have won. And then if that wasn't bad enough, there was another 50-plus yard field goal against the Vikings. And they were 0-10, and then they get a tie against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So come on. They take that 3 wins and but you know what? Hey, listen, they got a little bit of luck, too, because the Jacksonville Jaguars let Aiden Hutchinson slip to number 2. And when I covered the Jaguars in the Colts game, I said, there goes Aiden Hutchinson. But obviously, the Jaguars took the kid out of Georgia, and the Lions got Aiden Hutchinson anyways. But their receivers weren't that good. I think the thing that the Lions could probably use is a better backup quarterback in the event that Goff does get hurt. But again, we haven't even hit training camp yet, so we'll see what they got. But their wide receiver core wasn't good. And I like what you said, Willie. DeAndre Swift, they can stay healthy. That's important. So I can only imagine what type of roster you're going to be looking at when they play an opening day. Any other thoughts you want to mention now about the Lions before we go on to our last topic of the night?
I was just trying to think, didn't they draft a quarterback? Did they draft a young quarterback, a rookie this year?
Not
No.
this year they didn't. No.
So
No.
there was just a talk about the draft.
Talk about it, and then nothing happened.
Right.
Yeah, they have David Blau or Blau.
Yeah,
The two B boys.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see. I'm still trying to figure out what their identity is and what their identity is going to be. I mean, I understand the coach is a tough guy and he's fiery and all that other kind of stuff, but I'm still trying to see what type of identity this team is going to take on. I'm assuming because they have Jared Goff there that they're going to run the football a little bit more and be a little bit more physical. So when you're that type of team, you need to build from the inside out. Offensive line and defensive line. Make sure you have a great offensive line so you can run the ball well, and make sure you have a good defensive line so you can stop the run. Those are the things that you have to be able to do in the National Football League.
Yeah, I think we're all trying to figure out our identity, but the reality of the situation that we can all agree on, Brad Holmes was a great hire by the Lions. Last person I want to get to tonight, and I want to preface this one a little bit. When I was working for a radio show out in Phoenix called Weekly Wheels, I was ahead of my time with this particular subject, and when I spoke about it on Weekly Wheels in Phoenix in 2001, why there was not enough African-American participation in NASCAR, was it due to lack of finances? Of course, it's a very expensive sport to get involved in. And my co-hosts were on edge. They were a little bit nervous, but George Eichorn came on and called the show and addressed it. And we were able to kind of calm the waters a little bit, because when you're on regular radio, people tend to get a little bit sensitive towards a subject when you're talking about minorities. I get it. I understand it. I wasn't too far aligned with it, because let's face reality, African Americans to me are just as qualified to do any sport as they are anything. They just, sometimes some sports are a little bit more expensive than others, and NASCAR and hockey happen to be two of the more expensive sports, different than soccer. It's a little bit different than
baseball
and basketball, but NASCAR, you need a little bit of extra money in your pocket. So with that said, okay, that leads me to my final person of the night, NASCAR BubbaWallace, age 28. He's raced 166 times in 6 years, 1 win, 14 top 10s. He's currently driving for Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin. And of course, prior to that, he was Richard Petty gave him a ride. So I am so happy for BubbaWallace. I really am, that he's involved with NASCAR, and NASCAR needs a lot more like him, because remember, for the longest time, okay, let's say, I believe South Carolina is one of the few states where they had the Confederate flag out there. And, there's obviously a little bit of a good old boys mentality when it comes to NASCAR. But when you see the fact that, I think there was a situation that occurred in Talladega last year, and I don't exactly know what it is, so I don't want to get involved. But when there was a situation where it involved Bubba Wallace's garage, a lot of the NASCAR drivers came, say, hey, Bubba's one of us now. We accept him as one of us. So whoever's trying to pull these pranks or whatever, don't do it. We're behind this guy. And I'm so happy that Bubba Wallace has been able to maintain sustainability in NASCAR. And let me underline it, hyphen it, 48-point sustainability in NASCAR, which is a tough nut to crack. Willie, okay, take it from there.
Yeah, the incident that you're speaking of did draw a lot of attention, and rightly so. I don't want to get too far into that, but as I was really looking at this, Michael Jordan, his airness set the precedence here, and of course he's got his teammate from North Carolina and number 1 overall pick from 1986, I want to say, or 87, Brad Daugherty. He's also an owner in NASCAR, and I did not even know that. So again, Bubba Wallace, I haven't watched him race. I've always wanted to attend a NASCAR event, but for whatever reason that will remain undisclosed at this point, I have not gone. But anytime, I mean, look, my thing is this. Anytime a person that is qualified and is afforded an opportunity and then ultimately becomes successful, they're always going to be a winner and have my respect. And particularly in a field where you are basically the only minority, I can somewhat relate to that. There have been many times in my life where I was the only, black kid in the class, the only black kid or the only black person on a team in corporate America. So I can really empathize with Bubba in terms of what he's had to go through and struggles in trying to fit in a culture where nobody looks like you. And that takes in itself a lot of courage. And there's a lot of dark nights, and there's things that are said to you by people who you see every day and claim to be your friend. And then you find out later on in life that you ultimately find out this is who they were the whole time. So kudos to him and all that's connected to him. I can only understand, or I can only imagine rather, some of the things that's been hurled at him. And look, when you are able to persevere, and as my hat says, SBS, it stands for shake back. When you're able to do that, you get a hand clap from me.
Yeah, I mean, right now, BubbaWallace is carrying the burden of a minority candidate in a sport that doesn't have a lot of them. It's different with some of the other sports where there's been a bit more participation, but NASCAR is just a totally different animal. And I've covered a lot of races. I've been in a lot of garages, and George and I have covered some well when we were at Michigan International Speedway. I've done around the country, and what BubbaWallace is doing is truly remarkable. I want to turn it over to Mel. Okay, what are your thoughts about what BubbaWallace has done in NASCAR?
We as African Americans, we stand on the shoulders of giants. BubbaWallace is not the first one to do it. BubbaWallace, if it wasn't for Michael Jordan, we might not be talking about BubbaWallace. If it wasn't for Michael Jordan forming a racing team, we may not be talking about BubbaWallace, because he had a hard time. I think it was 2 years ago, when he could only race a certain number of races because he only had one car. He didn't have any sponsorship. We know that he's a talented driver. We've talked about it, and he's still having problems. They're talking about his pit crew. They said if he just had a halfway decent pit crew, he'd probably do a lot better in races. Reverend Jesse Jackson said, as far as African Americans are concerned, when the rules are published and the playing field is level, we've been able to excel. And that's all we've ever asked for, is a level playing field and an opportunity. And we've been able to succeed in a lot of different fields, whether it's been on the gridiron, whether it's been on the basketball court, whether it's been on the baseball diamond, race car, wherever it's been. You think about, they've done a lot of things. There's a lot of things that have been done to limit African Americans. Just think about when Texas Western beat Kentucky in a national championship game. Next thing you know, they outlawed dunking.
Mm-hmm.
Because those brothers from Texas El Paso were coming in there and doing all kind of dunking and so forth and so on. And we know, we have some I won't say superior athletic ability, but there's a lot of guys with a lot of great athletic ability that happen to be African Americans. And at that particular time, that wasn't a part of the game. The game was a much different type of game. It was played below the rim, let's say. Well, all of a sudden you got these guys coming in playing above the rim. And so Adolph Russell said, hey, we somehow or another, we've got to level the playing field for us so that we can have an opportunity. We got to outlaw dunking. But, we haven't gotten this far because of ourselves alone. There's been a lot of good people, good white people that have helped us along the way. We weren't able to do the things we did in the civil rights movement without a lot of good people to help us and bring us along. You have to understand, we live in a country of 330 some odd million people. There's extremists on both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. But it's a small percentage. When you drive up and down the highway, most of the folks that you don't even know, but that you pass in your car, or that you may see in the shopping mall, or you may see in the grocery store, are good, solid individuals. There's only a few that make it so bad that you hear about on the news all the time, that make it seem like that we live in just a lawless society. That's not the case. And so there's only a few, really. There's some mindsets that have to be changed, and you're starting to see some mindset start to change, because with the younger generation, they're just different. I don't know if you call them the Gen Z, the millennials, whatever you want to call them. They just have a different thought process. And I think if you look at what happened with George Floyd, and you saw the young people that got involved, and it wasn't just young black folks that were involved. There's a lot of young white kids that were involved. They have a different thought process as far as human rights are concerned. And that's why, I felt it was so disturbing and upsetting that out of 330 million people in the United States, that the best that we could present to run for president were two 70-year-old white men. That just didn't make any sense. If that's the best that we had to choose from, is two 70-year-old white men to run this country, when there's so many young, bright, talented people of all different races, that this is what we were left. That's who was left standing when the dust settled. That was, to me, that was disturbing and upsetting.
But as far as BubbaWallace is concerned, I will say, though, to his credit, Richard Petty at least took a chance on him, and then he paired up with Michael Jordan. So with that said, George, take it away from there. What about Bubba? And then I have a few other things out there.
Bubba is in a tough situation, okay? Like you said earlier, Scott, it's a white boys sport. It always was NASCAR, good old boys, Southern boys, that whole thing. And they have just not had the minorities participate, and they got to look themselves in the face and in the mirror, really, because to expand that sport, I'm telling you, folks, there are a lot of empty grandstand seats in NASCAR races now. There never used to be, as you know, Scott. We've covered these races. They're automatic sellouts. Right. Well, not so much anymore. So I am so much happy about Bubba. I'll tell you what, he's the Jackie Robinson of auto racing, as far as I'm concerned. 60 years ago, when Jackie broke the color barrier or more, it's a shame it took that many years for Bubba and any other black drivers to, cross the finish line, so to speak, and to participate in the sport. They got a long ways to go. And a lot of it is sponsorships too. Like Mel was saying, he couldn't get a good ride. He couldn't get the sponsors. It's a lot of money's involved in all that in auto racing. But I mean, we don't have good African-American representation in IndyCar. Thank you for Lewis Hamilton has done a great job in Formula One. Our hats off to Louis Hamilton of Great Britain for being a champion driver. But we have a long way to go. One of the things I want to tell you, though, is now that the Detroit Grand Prix IndyCar race is back downtown, you're going to see a concentrated effort of the Detroit Grand Prix people, led by Roger Penske and Bud Denker and Merrill Kane, to go into the community more. They're going to try to rally black young men and women and all minorities, as well as whites, to experience motor racing. I am so happy that they are now moving back downtown with that Detroit Grand Prix road course or street course, as opposed to Belle Isle, which is a wonderful setting in itself. But, I know they're going to do that because I have that on a good source, that they are going to try to involve the Detroit community in that race, and as much as fans and executives and people to support the race and work at the race. So I'm all for it. I mean, auto racing is way behind the times as far as minorities go.
Yeah, well, the accessibility is, so difficult.
Accessibility. Exactly, Mal.
We know how to run away from the police in cars, but getting one of those kind of cars and that's a lot of money.
Well, I should point out we do have a comment in the chat room by Dave Jones who says hiring someone because of race or gender is simply wrong. We're all humans. The best qualified human we can find should always get the nod, period. So I understand that. So we appreciate Dave Jones going out there and at least putting a comment, and we want to make sure that anytime somebody goes out there, provides a comment, that I want to make sure that you guys are in front of it. So with that said, I want to go over a couple other things here, and then I'll have some closing thoughts. But, again, this is a subject that needs to be addressed. For those of you just joining us right now, we ask you to subscribe to the South Florida Tribune on our YouTube channel, or visit www.southfloridatribune.com and follow us on Twitter at Tribune South. So, and to advertise, call us at 954-304-4941. The audio portion of the show can be heard on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. So please go ahead and subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. And it's always great to be able to get some comments in from a lot of our people in the chat, because after all, this is what the show is about, to make sure that everybody else has an opportunity to go ahead and voice their opinion. And that's why we come up with stimulating topics that need to be addressed. I want to point out one other thing that's important, and I'm glad that we've gone into the depth. When you talk about guys like Tony Dungy and Mike Tomlin, unfortunately, they don't grow on trees, but at least they've helped, but there aren't enough of them. George, I love the Jackie Robinson analogy. In terms of NASCAR, I think it's very, very appropriate. But the one thing I want to address here that we talked about earlier is a Rooney Rule with the compensatory pick for a first-time hire. I believe, Mel Farr, you addressed that as what? The team that actually is losing the candidate gets two third-round picks. Is that correct? So I think any way that you could go ahead and stimulate it, if it's not coming over from the team, at least the league, a compensatory pick, at least said something. Is the Rooney Rule doing enough? I don't know. That'll be for another show. A lot of people wonder about it, but at least incentivize it enough where at least you're going to consider an African-American candidate. And if it takes a compensatory pick to get some more interviews, and I'm okay with that. So Mel, we talked about it earlier. Go ahead and address that, please.
Well, we know the Rooney Rule has some flaws, and it's been abused over the years. Because again, we talked about it before with Jerry Jones and hiring the coaches they have there right now. I can't think of his name right now, but McCarthy. The Rooney Rule has its flaws, but some good things have come about. Initially, like I said, it was to give African Americans an opportunity to go through the interview process because they weren't even getting interviews. So they wanted them to go through the interview process. Now, we want hires. We don't want just interviews. We want hires, and there are, in a lot of people's opinion, there are very qualified coordinators out there that are not getting the opportunities, that are getting passed over for people that you've never heard of before. Like Byron Leftwich, Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy. There are a lot of guys that get every year. Their name is being brought up by the media, but somehow or another they're not getting the jobs. So now we want the jobs. And the way the Rooney Rule is currently doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me because there's no incentive for the team to hire an African American or a minority candidate. But guys are qualified. I mean, you look at the league. The league is 75-80% African American. So if you're good enough to play, you ought to be good enough to coach the game. You ought to be good enough to be in the front office. You ought to be good enough to scout the game. You ought to be good enough to be a general manager, a player personnel director, so forth and so on. If you're good enough to play the game, you ought to be good enough to do that. And, again, it's just these old stereotypes, and guys are just comfortable with what they're comfortable with and comfortable with communicating with people who they're used to communicating with. Tony Dungy was an outlier without question. He's totally goes against what most rich white men probably go for. Tony's not flamboyant. He's not a person who is arrogant. He's very confident in what he does, but he's also a very spiritual and religious man as well. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't cuss. So that may not sit well with some owners. They may not like that. They may want a guy who's fiery, like what we have up there in Detroit. There's different ways. I was fortunate enough. I played for a couple different coaches. And I was listening to something, and they said, you can make a dog love you two ways, or a dog obey you two different ways. You can beat the dog to death, and he'll do what you want him to do, or you can love the dog to death, and the dog will do what you want him to do. But the thing about that dog that you beat to death, you got to worry about him one day snapping back at you. I played for Dan Reeves, and I played for John Robinson. Dan Reeves liked to fine you for everything. Fine you for late being meetings. Fine you for being overweight. Fine you for going off sides. Fine. If you went off sides, you got to run a lap. John Robinson was like, hey, look here. We live in the greater Los Angeles area. We understand that you may get caught up in traffic sometimes, and you might be late. Just all he asks you to do is just come on the meeting. Don't interrupt the meeting. Now, if we see this thing become a problem, this thing become a habit, then we're going to have a conversation about it. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. people weren't late. People respected that. People weren't late for Dan Reeves either because you didn't want to get fined. So, I mean, again, there's a couple different ways that you can go about conducting yourself.
Well, before I turn it over to George, one thought that's entered my mind while you were saying that, Mel, I wish that Mean Joe Green would have had the opportunity to get a head coaching job. And I'll say this for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was assistant coach under Don Shula and Chuck Noll and Dave McGinnis out in Arizona. And I had a chance to meet Joe Green many years ago. And it's just a shame that Rudy Roll never even got him an interview. But geez, oh, Pete, you got Chuck Noll and Don Shula. You're learning from them. And I can tell you they have some Super Bowls in their pocket. So, all right, Willie, go ahead. What are your thoughts about what we just talked about here? Just continue on.
Ground Chuck. I can appreciate what Mel said about Dan Reeves and John Robinson. But the Rooney Rule itself is a joke.
Okay.
It is a joke. It is not working. Number one, there should not even be such a rule in this NFL. This NFL, of which we, at first it was the knock on the black quarterback. Now we have what we have now. Then it became a knock on coordinators. Now we have what we now have now. Then it was a knock on, then it became and still is a knock on head coaches. As far as if I can remember correctly, there are as many NFL black head coaches as there are in this room that I'm in, which is one. It's a joke and a compensatory pick. Ooh, Scott, I don't want to go too far into this, man, because I can go all day. But I'm going to say this and I'm going to just relinquish it. A compensatory pick to me is illustrative of the disrespect of the kind of qualifications that an African American or any minority coach for that matter has. If you really want to make a dent in it, make them give up a first rounder.
Okay, that's fair. And by the way, just as I understand the three current African American coaches, you have Lovie Smith, Todd Bowles, not the emotional guy, and of course Mike Tomlin. So you have three guys there who, and I actually,
the guy in Miami too.
Right. Well, Mike McDaniel, is he considered African American?
Yeah,
he said he is.
Yeah,
is he? I don't know. I'm not going to go there. I've had 5 eye operations. I don't want to have 6 for some reason or another. If someone's a little bit lighter than the other, I don't know how they classify them. I don't want to get in trouble. I'm not going to do it. Mike McDaniel, but I do know that you have Lovie Smith, you have Brian Flores, and you have Todd Bowles, who, by the way, isn't your rah-rah guy either. But if he wins the Super Bowl, who needs a rah-rah guy? And Mike McDaniel,
Flores is not a head coach.
What's that?
Flores is not a head coach.
Flores is not a head coach.
I'm talking about Mike Tomlin.
Oh, he's with Mike Tomlin.
Yeah,
right. That's who I was mentioning. So Flores, thankfully, was hired by Mike Tomlin, so at least he's still working. But I don't want to get too deep into that because that could drag on a while. But nevertheless, I totally understand that maybe a first round pick might be more of a head scratcher or more of an incentive to do it. But I don't know what's really an incentive anymore. I mean, you've been dealing with this dilemma for a long, long time. So. I'm all for the best candidate getting the job, regardless of what the skin color is.
It just has to be a change of heart, People have to have a change of heart
and ownership.
I think
you had a good man in Detroit and Jim Caldwell, and they let him go.
Oh yeah, that was a bad.
So I agree with Mel. There's got to be more of an incentive, and Willie and a first round pick or something. But it's a shame that the football world still has to do this. They still have to have. Or try to level the playing field because of the bullheadedness of these owners. And you guys are right. I mean, there are so many coordinators out there that deserve a shot at being the head coach in the NFL, minorities. And, basically, I don't really have any more to add than the fact that it's just they're underrepresented and they shouldn't be. And it's just it's a bad mark on the NFL. And it has been for years. It's all started with Pete Rozelle. And, it's gone on from there, been perpetuated under the ownerships, the commissioners. And, it, like you said, Mel, I mean, most of the players are African-American. There's so many fans that want to see every team give him a shot, a black head coach, black assistant into becoming a head coach. And this token business of interviews, yeah, I mean, that's disgusting. I mean, when
Yeah.
they're just going through the motions, which, they'll never admit, of course, the owners or the GMs, that it was just going through the motions. But we all know that it's happened many, many times.
Yeah.
It's got to stop.
The one thing I want to add to, and then we'll wrap it up here because I want to summarize for those that are just joining us, is I thought David Culley got a raw deal with Houston. I really do. I think that was horrible. While I'm glad that Lovie Smith is, in charge there, I realize that Lovie's a very qualified coach. But what happened to David Culley, taking on a situation where he knows Deshaun Watson and even win 4 games in that situation, to me, he deserves a gold medal in that sense. So, unfortunately, and I'm not going any further than that. I'm just saying David Culley got a raw deal with the Houston Texans, and that's it. So with that said, I want to just recap here real quick. At the beginning of the Real and the Rare, we talked about Miami Marlins general manager Kim Ng, home run hire, pun intended. San Jose Sharks hire, okay, Mike Greer, excellent hire, and I hope he does well. Las Vegas Raiders, first female black president, Sandra Douglas Morgan, rooting for you really hard. Detroit Lions general manager, executive vice president, Brad Holmes. Guess what? Okay, watch out. This guy will win an award for executive of the year down the road. And last but not least, the only way I can describe BubbaWallace is he is a true warrior in every sense of the word. And if we had gone any more than 5, this show probably would go. We would need Jerry Lewis to go ahead and have a telethon and a marathon here, and we're not going to do that. We're going to leave it where it's at. But if I'm going to bring back the real and the rare, I think it's so important that we started off with an incredible topic. Are minority hirings improving in sports? I'd like to think there's progress, but believe me, we are far from the finished product. With that said, George, a real quick closing thought.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention, when you talked about Holmes, of course, his uncle, Luther Bradley, played for the Detroit Lions. And Luther Bradley went on to a very successful career with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan as a sales rep. And Luther cannot be more proud than to see his nephew in the Lions front office. So, Scott, I'm glad we tackled this subject today. Like you said, there's so many more things we could talk about, but it's been really a good time with all of you. Very important.
All right, Mel, any closing thoughts? And I know you got Kenzo there, and then everybody will be able to wrap it up and let everybody know where they stand.
No, just look forward to seeing what the Lions are going to do. Obviously, excited about the future for the first time in a long time. You feel optimistic. Hopefully, it's not like every other year where by week 4 we're talking about we'll get them next year.
All right, Willie, quick thoughts.
Yeah, I just appreciate you guys welcoming me in. I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you guys about a myriad of different things. And to answer the question, Scott, are minority hires good for sports? The quick answer is yes, and the quick answer is yes, and the long answer is yes because it's good for society.
Okay, but when you give me the yes, okay, and if I ever send you a text, okay, give me the yes instead of the heart, so that way I know your front finger is working, that you know how to type in kind of a text. Just
Right.
kidding with you, Willie. I do that because I love you anyway. So with that said, okay, Willie, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you?
They had Twitter at Shakeback Media Group. You can actually search my name because the way I spell Shakeback Media Group is a little it's abbreviated a little bit. Also on Instagram at Shakeback Media Group, Twitter, same thing. YouTube. Appreciate you guys hitting the smash subscribe button there. We reached a milestone earlier today with 250, so I'm happy about that. And right here with you guys.
All right, so we go from one junior Willie Epting Jr. to Mel Farr Jr. Mel, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, all the different social media sites at Mel Farr Jr., just like it says there. And then you can check out what we have going on in Detroit and Atlanta for the youth at melfar.org.
All right, George, go ahead.
At Twitter, you see my handle there at S&G Sports 99. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn as well, George Eichorn, and Facebook as well. And I'm the author of a book called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. a nice book for you to find out all about the history of sportscasting in Michigan, including our very own host, Scott Morganroth, who's in the book.
Oh, there you go. Goodbye for everybody out there. Well, as you know, my name is Scott Morganroth, Motor City Madmouth, obviously originated, born in Detroit area. Okay, and I mentioned it earlier. I'll mention it really quickly. All we ask you to do is please subscribe to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Get a lot of great shows out there. www.southfloridatribune.com gets it done on Twitter at Tribune South. I mentioned a lot of the audio portion of the program. I'll say it one last time. Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And again, a quick kudos to Candy Ebley, who does an incredible job with the website. So you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. So once again, on behalf of George Eichorn, Mel Farr Jr., Willie Epting Jr., my name is Scott Morganroth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Real and the Rare. And we look forward to more and more episodes together with Willie and I and anybody that wants to participate. But we are glad to bring it back. And I think we probably brought it back with a very strong message that we hope and pray that the minority hikes continue to improve. We certainly made progress, but not enough. So on behalf of my incredible crew that gave everything they had tonight on this very, very important subject, we thank you very much for joining us. Have a good night. We'll catch you till the next time. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye.